I just want to say hi to everyone. Good to see you. Thank you for being here. And that's a purposeful, not only because that's my personal intention, is I love to connect with people, but also in a way of answering the question, which is, to me, I think, first of all, mindfulness and words, I love to traffic in language. You think of something like healthcare, we were not going to get into it, but it's really sick care, right? Like doctors are experts in pathology. So mindfulness, to me, is also a little bit of a misnomer. Like I would actually speak more to mind emptiness. I think people's minds are already full of too much shit, to be honest. So for me, one of the things you can start with is really just being totally okay where you are, right? Because oftentimes when you think about mindfulness, it's often associated with an intention. And if you have an intention, which is not, it's neither good nor bad, but invariably you're creating time, right? Because what most human beings are being sort of inspired by or informed by is desire or wanting. And so mindfulness could become the next form of desire. And when you want something, if you really think about it, it's a future-based proposition. So you're trying to actually get to something which actually then takes you out of where you are. So it's very slippery, right? So if you can understand that for me, true mindfulness or true emptiness is that I'm totally at peace with who I am and where I am right now.
I'm really getting in what you're saying too, this sense of like enoughness, you know, whatever is present, that being enough and working with that.
Yeah, and I think it's the biggest struggle for a human being, like the primordial imperative of what we could call our ego is to survive. But what we're surviving is usually these deeper narratives that there's something wrong with me, there's something missing in my life, and there's something wrong with life. And so it's this sort of, I love to use analogies to help people understand, but if you imagine you're in Arizona, or actually downtown LA today, where it's 110 degrees, it's pretty toasty, right? It's not ideal for us to be optimized as human beings, but you're driving around Phoenix and it's 120 degrees out. And I think sometimes mindfulness or overly sort of attempting to control environments, which, let's face it, as human beings, we have a proclivity to do, is like driving around in your car with the windows rolled down and you've cranked the air conditioning because you're under the impression, if I could just cool down Phoenix, then I'll be okay. And you wonder why you're all fucking tired. So hopefully that helps, right? So just, you know, let your in-laws and your siblings and your kids be who they are, and you find your 68 degrees inside of yourself.
Oh, I love that. Nicole.
It's okay. Yeah. We're all family here. Like we're.
Peter, I would love, you know, as the mind architect, what foundational practices do you recommend for achieving human optimization and mindfulness?
Well, first, I'm kind of disappointed that you saw her post with 20 orcas.
What
but you didn't
got?
see me in an ice plunge with 20 dead mosquitoes. I totally made that up.
So brave.
The mosquitoes, yes. So practices, I think, first of all, like I was sort of pointing to earlier, I think to discern the difference between mindfulness and what that is as an intentionality for a lot of people. I'm in the business of optimizing life, and if you look at us as multidimensional human beings, like you can just look at the basic things you'd see in a spa, right? Spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical. So if you're going to optimize, then I think it's important that you look at the hierarchy of how things come into existence, as far as I'm concerned. When most people, and I work with a lot of high-end performers, athletes, they're looking at optimization in terms of results, which you could usually collapse with physicality, right? You go and see an expert, something you want to do, especially if in an arena of athletics or performance, you're going to look in the domain of doing, action. I like to make pretty bold statements. I kind of like to trigger people a bit. It's fun. So the one that I'm going to say right now is that you can't actually access true vitality unless you free your mind first. Now, if you really hear that, right? So if you look at the hierarchy as far as I'm concerned, okay, we can say the subtler realms of the spiritual, fine. But inside of that, we've got mental, then emotional, which is the bridge between the mind and the body, right? You know, how you feel about something, because really the perspective and the view that you are of life, like someone pissed you off, is because of how you see them. You feel that as frustration, anger in your body, and then you're going to, over time, that would cascade through your physiology, and it might even become a sickness, because dis-ease is the precursor to disease. So if you understand the hierarchy of how things come into existence, then you can start to really explore true optimization. So I'm obviously biased because I focus predominantly on our most powerful piece of equipment, which is people think between your ears, but I want you to, again, consider it's not. Right? If people say, where's your mind? What would most people do? Where would they point? And I can't see you, so you can engage. Okay, right? So you're going to point up here. So I want you to consider something. That's not inaccurate, but it's insufficient because that's where the brain is. But just to use an analogy, again, this room, I'm going to guesstimate is like a couple of thousand square feet, 1,500 square feet. Would we in this room have a conversation about holding the Olympics in this space, yes or no? No, it doesn't afford us that space, right? It's not big enough to have that conversation. As a simpler example, if you lived in a 500 square foot studio, you're not going to say to your friend, hey, I heard you're getting married next month and you've got 300 people on the guest list. Why don't we throw it in my 500 square foot studio? Right? It doesn't occur. Does that make sense? So in this case, I want you to realize that the subconscious constraints that most people are oblivious to are like the walls of a studio or this room. So if there are things that you want in order to optimize your life, you first have to investigate what's in the way. Does that make sense? So in order to optimize, the practices are, to answer Debbie's question, is self-inquiry. And you know how you get self-inquiry? You live life and you see where you get pissed off. Usually family, spouses, right? So wherever you're getting triggered by anything is the opportunity to see where you're not okay with something. If you're not okay with something, you don't recognize your divine, timeless, boundless essence, which can manifest anything you want, because you're living in a confined room, in this case called your subconscious, based on the events of your childhood, which is not your fault, and it's certainly not your parents' fault. A lot of people like to point at them, which is a trigger to show where you are confined. The constraints with which you arrive, to me, is the opportunity that is to be human, to break beyond those so that you can access the potential and the optimization that you have as a divine gift by virtue of being human. I don't know if that's good enough.
Thank you.
So the practice is live life, see where you get pissed off, and then inquire, why is it that I'm not recognizing that I'm a god or a goddess, and I'm pretending to be someone who can be easily offended by life?
Let's take a breath. Let's think about that for a second. You know, the triggers are where the truth lies. And when, I think so often, especially now, if you are, just kind of really connecting to mental health from an Instagram meme graphic perspective, which we're learning a lot, but, it's all about avoiding triggers and how not to be triggered and not really realizing that it's our greatest tool to self-actualization. The ability to be present with our own discomfort and not judge ourselves while we're in it, but to look at it, to observe it, to ask it questions. That's how we become. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. If I could just share one quote, if you don't follow me, then there's obviously something wrong with you. But I share in quotes a lot of sort of things to transcend traditional thinking, and one that people love is I say, life will present you with people and circumstances to reveal where you're not free. So that's why my whole product is freedom, right? We're all here to break free as far as I'm concerned. So.
Thank you so much. I have to reiterate